In the last section, we updated our multi-client image, and then we pushed the result off to Docker Hub. We're now going to move on to step 3, which is to somehow convince our deployment to recreate or otherwise update all of our pods with the latest version of that multi-client image. Now, unfortunately, step 3 right here is very challenging, and there's not a very good solution around it. Now, that might be very surprising, but I just want to be very clear with you. In the world of Kubernetes, convincing a deployment to recreate our pods with the latest version of an image is not the easiest thing in the world to do. So inside this section, we're going to take a look at why this is challenging, and then we're going to look at a couple of different ways to solve this problem. Now, before we start talking about why this is challenging or any of the solutions, I want to very quickly mention to you that on the GitHub page for the Kubernetes repo, you can go to the issues board and reference issue number 33664. To get to this issue in particular, you can just type that issue number directly into your address bar. This is an entire issue with a ton of different conversation going on here, talking about how challenging it is and suggesting different ways of convincing your deployment file to somehow update all the pods that it is managing. So I do recommend maybe taking a quick glance at this issue thread and getting a better idea of some of the root causes here and some of the different ways of solving the problem. All right, so let's take a look first at why this is so challenging to get a deployment to update the image that is being used by all the pods that it manages. I want to first remind you that in order to update any object inside of our Kubernetes cluster, we make a change to our deployment file, and then we send the deployment file off to the kubectl command line tool with something that looks like this right here, right? We do the kubectl apply. Now, the issue that we have right now is that inside of our deployment file, there's nothing inside of here that says, hey, I want to use some particular version of our multi-client image. So when we send an update to multi-client off to Docker Hub, when we make our updated version of that image and we send it off, there's nothing that we can kind of turn back around to this file with and say, hey, I want you to now use like the latest image. Now, the reason that's such a big deal is that if we try to take an unchanged configuration file and apply it with kubectl, if there's no changes in the configuration file, then kubectl apply is just going to flat out reject the file. Let's try that out right now. Remember, we've already applied this file and we've made no changes to it since we last authored it. Okay, or excuse me, since we last applied it. So back at my command line, I'll do a kubectl apply -f client deployment.yaml. And then when I run this command, it's going to tell us that the file is unchanged. And so the entire file, the entire apply command is just flat out rejected because the config that we're trying to upload is identical to the last config we put in place. Now, when you put this file up, it's unchanged. That means totally rejected. So there's nothing inside that process that says, oh, we should probably go and see if a new version of this image is available. That does not occur. At no point when you try to re-upload or reapply that config file, it does not try to see if a new version of this image is available. And so the entire apply command just flat out rejected. That's why this is such a big issue. Okay, so with all that in mind, we're now going to look at a diagram that's going to lay out 3 possible solutions that we could use to get around this issue. So none of these solutions are really that great, I'll be honest with you. None of them are really that good. They're kind of the best of a bad situation. Okay, so here's the first option we can use to get our deployment to update with the latest version of that image. We could manually delete all the pods that are managed by that deployment. Now, when we manually delete a pod that is managed by a deployment, the deployment is going to very quickly notice that the pod is missing, and it's going to attempt to recreate it automatically.